Welcome to our CyberWise Chats, where we talk about the challenges of raising and teaching digital kids. I'm Diana Graber, author of Raising Humans in a Digital World and founder of CyberWise and CyberCivics. Join every episode with Dr. Pamela Rutledge, who's the director of the Media Psychology Research Center. Our always lively conversations tackle topics like cyberbullying, screen time, TikTok, and everything in between. We've got some great guests and promise each chat will give you the tips, tricks, and confidence you need to help kids use technology safely and wisely. Well, welcome everyone. Hi Pam, hi Sony. Good to see you guys.
Nice to be
Welcome.
here.
Yeah, welcome to all of you who are joining us today, whether you're on the webinar with us or listening to us on the podcast. I'm Diana Graber, founder of CyberWise and CyberCivics and author of Raising Humans in a Digital World. Here, as always, with Dr. Pamela Rutledge, who is the director of the Media Psychology Research Center. And today, we are going to talk about teachers on the front lines when social media problems come to school. So we're really excited to have as our guest someone who is on the front lines. That's educator Sony Albright. Sony and I just figured out that we've been working together for 12 years now, which is funny because she looks like she's just about 20 years old. So I don't know how that happened. Yeah, Sony is a seasoned educator with 22 years of experience, including 12 of those teaching cybercivics, our digital media literacy curriculum. I met Sony when she was working in Northern California. Today, she is the enrollment manager at the City of Lakes Waldorf School, where she wears the hat of Waldorf CyberCivics Ambassador, in addition to earning a master's degree in special education. She's also the mom to 4 digital kids. So one of those people who just doesn't wear one hat, wears about 80 hats. So Sony, thank you so much for making time for us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you,
All right.
Pam.
You know, we chose this topic today because it's one we hear from teachers about a lot. And that's, this thing about kids on social media are using technology and they have these issues that then come to school and it really disrupts or impacts the school day. So because we were hearing about it a lot, we thought we should get some data. So we did a little research study. We sent out a survey to teachers asking about this, and we asked them, how often do problems that originate online impact your learning environment? 92% of teachers told us often or sometimes. Only 8% said never. We also asked them to describe the most common problems because we were curious. We kind of thought we knew, but we wanted to hear from you guys what you're experiencing. Kind of one thing rose to the top, and that was digital drama, which we're going to talk about what that is and how it shows up in the classroom. Here's a little quote that might resonate with you. Social media and relationships end up impacting social lives in the school. Rumors, drama, hurt feelings, etc., detract from the learning environment. So that was one thing. The second thing that really stood out, and boy, this is one that I hear about a lot too, and I really want to talk about today, but that's sharing images that are embarrassing or hurtful without asking permission. And that happens a lot. So those are the two big things that stood out to me. Pam, I'm going to turn to you. What jumped out at you from these surveys?
Well, we talked about this earlier. I think the digital drama was really pronounced. And what struck me is that part of what inspired this topic for us was all of this talk all over the country about we have to ban social media from the schools and we have to turn off the internet or whatever it is they think they're going to do. And while I think that banning phones in the classroom or restricting them is really an important thing to do because it just eliminates distractions. It does not touch on digital drama at all and all of the stuff that these teachers are reporting coming into the classroom. So that dichotomy was really striking to me.
Right, right. And then Sony, before we ask you to share your personal experiences, what about the survey jumped out at you?
I think as a teacher and as a parent, the biggest takeaways for me were when you read the teacher comments, yeah, they were all in the digital drama category. But we're talking about kids that are trying to make a million choices in a very small amount of time with a really low amount of brain capacity to handle the ethical, safety, privacy, and just, values-based decisions that they're asked to make all the time. So to me, it was really interesting just to look again and remind myself how much we're asking kids to do in the digital space. And then the second question is, how much are we giving them by way of tools to actually be able to have a fighting chance to do what's right and to do it the right way.
That's such a good point. And the younger they're on, the fewer tools they have in the toolbox, regardless of they're being taught them or not. Their brains just aren't ready to understand what another person is feeling or thinking or reacting to. So that's another constraint that kids have. So I want to kind of zone in on this digital drama idea because I think it's really important to distinguish between cyberbullying and digital drama. It's something that we teach in cyber civics. We want the kids to know the difference. So cyberbullying is a really distinct and serious thing. It's online, it's intentional, it's harmful, and it's repeated. Digital drama are just the common everyday tiffs that have happened forever between kids, spilling over into the online world and spilling back into the offline world. It's not to say that it's not hurtful, because it is, but it just doesn't rise to the level of cyberbullying. And it was interesting in our study, bullying wasn't really called out much. It was all this little digital drama stuff. So Sony, maybe you can give us some examples of how you deal with that in the classroom.
Yeah, well, as I was thinking about just kind of what's happening in my classroom and the changes that have happened in the last 2 decades of teaching, wow, I'm really aging myself here, 2 decades in the classroom. There are a lot of differences right now. And the biggest one I would say for sure in the last 20 years, even though that was really the rise of cell phones, and I've always been in middle school and high school, so I really was on the forefront of seeing that happen. It is no longer differentiated. The online, offline is basically the same place to kids. I think a lot of parents struggle with that it can be differentiated or that it is not the same thing that's happening for kids. It is just one fluid place of being. And so once we kind of reckon with that, the other thing that I'm really seeing in the classroom is that parents have a lot of expectations for kids to have technological literacy. How do I use the computer? What do I do on there? How can I get my work done? All these things that they really expect from schools and teachers, and rightly so. It makes sense. A lot of it has to do with academic work. But they themselves and also their students don't have media literacy behind the technological literacy. And so the classroom is a confusing place. We're kind of in this like middle space where we are asking kids to do these things. Again, I already called out the choices. That's the biggest thing I see with kids is they literally make bad choices in a matter of seconds. And they're asked to do that so many times in a row. And so I guess when it comes to social media, talking to kids continuously in the same way I would talk to them about being in community or, having healthy bodies, all of those things that we do as teachers, that's really the place where I'm starting and the things that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about social media.
Right. And I did want to say, if you're here today or you're watching this, we're going to give you some resources that you can actually use. And we have a really great video on dealing with that digital drama. And it gives kids tools on what they can do. And it gives examples in the video of digital drama. And I'm laughing to myself here because in one of our examples, we use Sony's name for one of the characters. So sorry about that, Sony. Apropos that you're here today. So you'll be getting an email tomorrow with a link to that video. But Pam, talk to us about what's happening here with when the drama's happening.
Well, that's what I wanted to say is that point, Sony, that you made about kids' developmental ability is so important because a lot of tweens and teens, they look like adults. So we expect them to act like adults, but they don't have that level of cognitive or social or emotional maturity. And that means because the hormones are flowing and because they're very emotionally driven, the decisions, as you say, get made instantly and they get made without rational thought. They get made based upon emotions. I'm mad at her. I want her to like me. I want him to notice me. Whatever the drive is, that social drive, which is fueling pretty much everything. They don't care so much about their grades unless their parents care. They care about their social world. And you're so right about no division between online and offline. It's all one place for them.
Right. And the other thing too is like to be in school today, kids are required to use technology like Google Classroom and their classroom management, where they get their grades. And then to ask them not to use technology for social media between each other. I mean, it's all just big one thing, And so to really focus on the behaviors, forget about the tools, as Pam has told me so many times, and just really focus on the behaviors and think about where kids are developmentally and practice these things in the classroom. I mean, one of the most powerful things that I loved about teaching cyber civics is I could go in there teach to digital drama and talk about like, okay, let's talk about it. And when a kid sees, oh wow, the fact that I left you out of group chat, it really hurt someone's feelings. And now I see that because I see how sad you look. That's powerful. Like that teaches the kids that there's a real person behind the screen whose feelings can get hurt.
You know, when we teach people to drive, we give them a learner's permit for like 6 months and we make them practice, right? So we put them in class, we teach them all the rules, and then we go out and we make them practice on the road before we let them drive without, an adult driver with them. With social media, we give these kids technology. We don't prepare them. We don't give them opportunities to practice, and then we bust them when they do it wrong.
Right.
So it
And
seems
then
a
they
little
go
unfair.
under and then they hide when there's problems because they're afraid that you're going to take their phone away. So
One of my favorite things about being a teacher is working with parents. I really do love it. And something that I've noticed so much lately is how many parents feel inadequate to coach their child and to like be on this journey with them in delving into social media and independence online. And I think that's so unfortunate because just like what we do in cyber civics, you can teach this curriculum online or offline. You can teach this curriculum with devices or without, it doesn't matter. The point is not actually about the technology. My 80-year-old grandma can open up the iPhone box and start using it immediately. Everybody can do that. The user-friendly technology is there for all of us. What kids actually need is guidance on values in the home and what it is that parents have are trying to set expectations. And so I would really like to see more parents feel empowered and also recognize the legitimacy that they are bringing to the table. Yeah, you may not navigate TikTok or understand it or want to be on there. Great. But you should know what's happening on TikTok if your child is on there and be able to talk to your child about what your family values are and is what they're doing in relation to your family values, because that is one of the most supportive ways that teachers in the classroom can partner with parents in this digital drama is, are we all on the same page value system-wise?
yeah, I have an example, real life example about that. So talk to your kids if they're on TikTok, ask them what the current challenge is. What the current challenge is in my neighborhood is that on TikTok, kids are encouraged to go out at 2 a.m, kick or hit someone's front door, run and hide in the bushes and see how the people react. So good thing to know about, right? If you hear a noise in the middle of the night, you know now that it's a TikTok challenge, you're welcome. But that's an example of just talking to kids about what are you seeing on these apps? What's happening? Just be in the know like you would want to know about anything in their lives.
Well, and not just go, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, but say, what do you think about that? Is that something you would do? What it would be like for the person behind the door, so that you're having these conversations. You can say, this is what I'm worried about. How does it strike you? But if you just close the door telling them that it's a bad idea or it's stupid, you lost them.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I want to do is move on to the next one because when I think about a lot is like a lot of teachers mentioned that the problem that they see is kids sharing photos of one another or videos of one another without permission that are embarrassing or hurtful. Pam, I'm going to go to you to remind us why is that embarrassing and hurtful when you're a preteen or a teenager?
Well, I think we forget that this is a period of identity formation, right? So how we present ourselves is really important to how we feel about ourselves. And one of those parts is having boundaries, knowing what's sort of you and what's not you. And so when somebody shares your picture, that's a real violation, but it also puts a huge amount of pressure on you to be something that you might not want to be. And I want to extend that to parents too. This has become a huge issue with parents sharing pictures of their kids because they're cute. And the kids are mortified when they get to middle school of these pictures that are there for them. And they don't have the ability to be someone new, to grow, to change.
Yeah, I was just sharing the other day that we had a parent night and I asked my students, what is it, are you interested in me sharing with your parents? What cyber civics lessons should we do? And they hands down, without a doubt, were like, please do the one about sharing photos and agreements on sharing photos. They were like, my parents take pictures of me when I'm sleeping and they share it. They take pictures of me in the car when they share it. And so they were super horrified about that. And I'm so grateful whenever parents can do the cyber civics lessons right along with us I think I often tell my students, make sure you share this with parents too.
Yeah, and I'm just quickly reading through some of the comments we got from teachers on that about students sharing videos on TikTok of their friends. It hurts their feelings, or sharing them in group chats without asking permission. All of that stuff happens a lot. Again, parents do a lot of it. Kids do it with each other. But I don't know how many of us have had a conversation with a child about the idea of consent, when it comes to photos. And I mentioned earlier that we're going to give you resources for joining us today. We have a brand new curriculum called Digital On-Ramp. It's for 4th and 5th grades. And one of them is about digital consent. So you will be getting that lesson. We actually made a little digital consent form that the kids fill out and share with their friends. So we hope that that will be useful to you.
It's such a great way to introduce the concept of consent too, before they're mature enough where sexual consent becomes such a big deal and such a difficult thing for teens to navigate.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of kids don't even know what that word means in 4th and 5th grade, and then to translate it to the online world, I think is super useful for them. Okay, the next thing that was brought up a lot, and this is another one, this is really in relation to younger kids, content. Content that is inappropriate, scary, a lot of political content. That's a good one to talk about. But Sony, do you see that? Do you see content that plays out online coming into your classroom? Any kind of content?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in this particular survey, it was definitely digital drama. In my regular teaching life, I would say that's probably number 2 or number 3 concern that comes to me. And unfortunately, inappropriate content seems like kids are accessing that younger and younger. And I would say too, it's really tricky when you have kids with older siblings. There's this kind of idea that we have to shelter the younger kids and treat them the same way as we treat the older ones. And in many ways, you're kind of asking them to not have a relationship. If that's the case, it really can be tricky in the home to try to keep those things separated. But when I talk to parents about it, I'm asking them to be really aware, especially in younger grades, about how and when they can access and why, what are they doing on there? And again, as we always talk about on-ramping, using digital tools together and for a purpose, not just as a kind of mindless activity. And those things can really help a lot with kind of controlling where that content is coming from.
Yeah. And Pam, what is the impact of seeing harmful or scary content on a younger child?
I think there's a lot of different kinds of harmful or inappropriate content, right? Because teenagers are naturally going to be curious about things related to sex. What you want to make sure is that you have, as the teacher or the parent, some kind of open communication so that you can tell them, hey, there's this stuff out there. I worry about you seeing it. If you see it and it's upsetting, please come to me. Because what you don't want is for especially a young child to see something. We worried about this a lot during the Ukraine war, right? Where there was terribly violent images from real life, right, on TikTok, is that you want to prepare them for what to do if they run across it, because very likely we all will if you're Googling anything at all. So you want to know how to step away, block it. If you're upset, that's normal. Don't be ashamed. Just move, come to me, let's talk or move on. But I would recommend that, like you do, Sony, you touch in with your kids. What are you seeing? Anybody seen anything that's upsetting? How can we handle this? How do we support each other? Same with at home.
Yeah,
I was amazed in our last news unit how many of my kids don't read newspapers, don't read news on their phone or whatever, but only get their news really Instagram, Snap, TikTok, and just how much not only is it just headline based, don't even get me started on that, but then it's also just very much dependent on what the algorithm tells them that they want to hear and what kind of perspective of news. So I think, again, teaching cyber civics and letting kids kind of understand what's coming at them, why that particular news is coming at them, and how they can take control over. We spend so much time in 7th grade talking about algorithms and how people track you and what info vacuums are and how that information comes. Those are very serious when it comes to seeing inappropriate content. I think maybe 8 years ago or so, it would have been people worried about online predators, and that's of course still a really big concern. But the thing that I'm most concerned about with middle school kids right now and content coming their way is these sort of like hate speech vacuums that kids can easily get sucked into, and that is attached to news now. And so to me, it's just so much about understanding why news is coming to you in a certain way, being really aware about how to break out of those info vacuums. And like Pamela said, like stepping away from news when it's disturbing, but also just understanding why that particular thing am I looking at other things that's bringing this my way?
Well,
Yeah.
and understanding why those things attract your attention. I mean, my experience with teenagers is that they hate it when they're being manipulated. They do not like to be tricked. And so once they realize that they're being manipulated by these algorithms and that their brains are participating in what's getting their attention so that they don't have to feel, so responsible for making such bad choices all the time, that it really helps them make better choices.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up hate speech, Sony. I just gave a talk to a school about cyberbullying and hate speech, and parents worry about cyberbullying, but only it's still a big number. 28% of kids will be cyberbullied in their lifetime. 38% of kids will be exposed to online hate speech. So it's a very much bigger problem than cyberbullying. Parents should be aware of. So that content piece is really important. The other thing I wanted to mention is when kids come across, inappropriate, bad, scary, wrong content on any of the things they use, most of these apps and sites and games require kids to report it. They don't have the manpower or the bots or whatever to keep on top of the stuff. The content's coming so fast on all these apps that it is the user's responsibility in a lot of cases to report things like that. And all of these things have great mechanisms to do that. For example, Fortnite just launched a voice reporting. So if a child hears something that's inappropriate or mean or whatever, they can report it with their voice reporting feature. So that's another thing. If parents or teachers want to talk to their students about, is let them know that they are empowered with tools to report inappropriate, bad behavior.
And Diana, don't you think, I mean, I know the age is bare minimum, but when we're thinking about for sure social media platforms with this arbitrary 13-year-old age requirement, and then a lot of video games that have age limits on them too, I mean, those are, often given by what psychologists would look at and go, is this appropriate for, a 13-year-old to view, or would an 8-year-old be, able to view this? And I grew up in the 80s where we just kind of ignored the labels on movies and all of that. And I think parents should take those numbers really seriously, because they are really a bare minimum of what age could honestly handle that content. And it should be a very serious warning that you don't know which kids are most triggered by those kinds of things, but the age range is really, really helpful.
Yeah, and they should use the apps first to see what I mean, I look at stuff, Twitter, TikTok, and I think I'm not old enough to see that crap, So, I mean, honestly, it's shocking, what
Well,
slips through. So I think
it is, and
do
you
that.
have to remember that the algorithms aren't gonna capture things that are coded. In other words, if some word can't go through, it doesn't take very long before the people who are sending out the inappropriate messages figure that out, and they start using different words or emojis or some other way of communicating. So expecting that to all be contained is never going to work. So it's really important to prepare the receiver for knowing what to do when those things turn up. And, to your point, Sony, that, paying attention to, not just paying attention to the age limit, but talking about, kids go on Fortnite and Minecraft, they trash talk each other all the time. So having conversations about what does that mean and how does that affect somebody's mood to be trash talked, so that they start to develop that understanding of what it's like to say those words and what it's like to receive those words.
I'm gonna get really irritating now. We have a lesson for that too.
No, that's
Sorry,
not irritating. That's a fact.
Yeah, it's called You Are the Words You Use, and it's exactly about that. It's like the words you use reflect who you are, and there's a little activity that goes with it. But I mean, that's what I love doing this, because all of these problems that teachers pointed out, we have a lesson that solves the problem. And so the amount of time that they would spend dealing with the problem, it would be less time to preempt it with a real simple lesson that will go way far beyond that day's problem. So
And Diana, once you have that problem and you've already done that lesson, this is my experience teaching this program for so long. It's in your school, it's in your culture. So it works across the grades. It works with all of the kids that are experiencing cybercivics and the one that will experience cybercivics. They are ambassadors then for your expectation because everybody is on the same page. So it works afterwards too. It's not just preemptive, it is long lasting. So when it comes up, you can review. Remember, hey, we made this agreement, we set this stuff up already. Why aren't we doing this? How do we get back to this place? It's such an amazing way to set the base foundation of expectations.
And
some-
empower kids. There's
Empower,
such psychological power in giving people control over their devices and control over their behavior with ramifications, as you say, Sony, not just for them, but for other people, but also for everything they do in their life, because now they have a different view of themselves as capable and competent and being able to handle problems, not just opening an iPhone. And that's so key.
And something we were talking about before we went live is having common language. Vocabulary for all this is so important, especially with parents, because parents will say it's something and it's actually something else entirely. So to get the whole community on board with language and expectations, I think is huge. So, okay, I'm going to move on to the next thing that was really brought up by teachers, and that's kids feeling left out, whether it's left out of a group chat or left out because you're the last one to get a cell phone. So I'm sure, Sony, you deal with probably the second part of that quite a bit in your school.
Yeah, social health is such an important aspect of the teaching job nowadays. I would say, the expectations of parents, but also it's just really needed to lead by example and to also just build healthy culture inside of your classroom. And so exclusion is one of those really big risks. And that can be a matter of family values. It can be, some kids are allowed to play video games in 5th grade and this particular one, and some kids aren't. And so how do we deal with that? It can be, who has this type of genes and who doesn't. It can be those. So that's something kids will deal with their whole lives. What our job, or the thing that I really want to set up in terms of healthy social culture in our class, is giving kids a way to be fine with what they have, with owning what their own family values are, and then setting up the class expectations around respect, around courage for direct speech, around stating when you don't like something that's happening, all of those things that we set up in cybercivics in terms of how do we treat one another, how do we be in community, whether it's online or offline. And those things make us way more equitable because there's always going to be things where people are left out. When it comes to devices and digital drama, it is absolutely classic in 5th and 6th grade. I think these exclusion problems are the biggest. And that's because those are the ages where the haves and have not become really big. Some people get the things for the first time and people are figuring it all out. And really what I wish would happen is that parents would be working with teachers. Me as a teacher, I wish so much that parents would work with me to scale back when there is a big social detriment to the class, not just like, we're just going to do this thing. I would so much rather have a partnership with parents where we could say, you know what, this is causing a really big problem in this class. Can we just step back for a minute and evaluate, like, are we prioritizing our kids' social health over all of the other things? That speaks volumes to the students when we do that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, when I wrote my book, I wrote the discussion guide because I was hoping that parents would read it together in their groups so they'd get on the same page on these same topics, because it just helps the kids so much when, as you said, Sony, the culture is in agreement and there's not like the outlier kids, because I feel for the kids that are maybe the only ones left out of all the group chats. They never know what's happening because they don't have a cell phone, and that's okay because that's a family choice. But to just understand that feeling of left out is a hurtful feeling, and what can you do as a community to make sure that there aren't kids being left out? All right, so let's move on. What else? Oh, what was interesting to me? Well, I'm gonna say one other thing that was kind of brought up a lot is kids not knowing how to deal with ads and pop-ups. Like when teachers assign homework or any kind of work, and all of a sudden these things pop up or they get into filter bubbles and kids not knowing what to do. We have a lesson for that too, by the way. But I thought that was interesting that was a problem that you're seeing in the classroom. Are you seeing that, Sony?
Not so much. Kids definitely talk about that. I think in seventh grade, when we're really talking about how to use an incognito web browser and how to clear your cookies and all these other skill building things we do. This is the point where at the end of every one of those lessons, I say, now take this home to your parents. And when you see those pop-ups come up, this can help with some of those things. Make sure you teach your parents how to do these privacy things. And we all have a good chuckle about it, but honestly, they need to, and it's actually really helpful.
Yeah.
But that just shows how much parents presume that these kids, because they've grown up with technology, that they just know all this stuff. And they don't. I mean, they know, they know how to navigate the things that they use all the time, but navigating is not the same thing as having digital literacy. And I have to say, Sony, that calling this all sort of social health is like the smartest thing I've heard in years. I mean, it really encapsulates what it is you're trying to do for kids, because it isn't about technology. It's about approaching life that has technology in it.
Yeah, and all of these lessons have a component in there that's like, digital literacy is English language arts skills. It's like the ISTE technology standards. It's the CASEL social emotional competencies. All of those things that we're supposed to teach anyway can be tackled at the same time that you're dealing with the issues that Sony's talking about.
And most of the time, the kids are really motivated to receive it because it's so relevant to them. I mean, you wouldn't be shocked if you went into a seventh grade classroom again and you're talking about, teaching kids how to make their browser more private or how to, change their settings or whatever. That sounds super boring, right? So I had kids sharing things you know what? I didn't realize that when that screen comes up and it says, do you accept all those things, that I had choices, and then I could go back in and say no to 4 of them and just keep the essentials. Their eyes become open because they see it so many times. They've probably seen it 100 times before they realized they could say no to some of it. So I think it is such a testament to the level of depth that the curriculum brings and the way that kids get these little snippets every week. I teach the curriculum once a week to each grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And these little tiny, and they build on each other over time, and then they're able to revisit that again. And the number of kids that I have in high school that have come back, and we already talked about inappropriate content, but sexting, for example, is a big one of those. The number of kids that come back and say, I am so glad I knew XYZ. The sexting one is often one that they will bring back because I knew a kid who did this thing and they shouldn't have, and they didn't even know it was illegal, or they didn't even know they shouldn't have. And so I just think there's never a moment where I'm like, wow, this curriculum really isn't delivering the things that I needed to deliver. It is not only interdisciplinary, it's life skills, honestly.
Well, and think how much time that would save teachers if these kids had been trained in what copyright and plagiarism and, how to check quality of information, because you can't do a research paper if you don't know that stuff. But kids have to do research papers, and they have to do it without any kind of training in, sort of information management and validity. So it's, teachers, you should be signing up because you'll save yourself a lot of time.
I was laughing to myself as you were speaking, Sony, because I remember teaching a lesson actually, a lesson actually on copyright. And that lesson had an example in there from Fortnite and also a popular song that the kids liked. And I remember one of the boys walking out of the classroom going, that was the best class ever. We learned about Fortnite, the song that I loved. And it was I was so excited because it was things they did love, but they learned a very important lesson at the same time about copyright. So it's really fun when you can touch kids in that manner. Hey, I'm looking at the time, and I do want to bring up now, in your giveaways that we're giving you for being with us today. One of the top things is Pam wrote a really, really good post, and I'm going to give you the link to it. But at the end of it, she has her 5 top tips or giveaway or takeaways for today's topic. And Pam, I'm going to go to you now to kind of maybe quickly review those because I think they're super helpful to teachers.
Okay. So the real takeaway from all of this is that all of these problems in class really demand some kind of digital literacy, social health training. And so the 5 tips were really culled from all these things that the teachers were saying. And the first one is talk about it. Don't ignore this stuff. talk about it so that kids have a conversation with you. So when they run into troubles, they will want to talk about it with you. And the second is make very clear rules. If you don't allow cell phones in your class, fine, don't allow them. Make that a rule, be very clear, enforce it, and make sure the kids know that that's your rule, and whether or not, Mr. Jones in the next class has it or not, doesn't matter, that's your rule. And it's the same as true with parents. If you're going to enforce a rule, if you're going to have a rule, you have to enforce it, and you have to enforce it fairly. The third one, Sonia, you talked about this so much, and I think it's so important, is getting parents involved. Right now, there's so many parents totally freaked out about, the terrible social media and the impact on mental health. And I'm not going to go into the fact that the research doesn't support this, or the fact that there are many different kinds of social media and they don't make that distinction. But parents, you need to be on the same page here with your kids and trying to teach them to be good media users, not repress it, because nothing makes something more desirable than trying to take it away, and nothing protects them better than educating it. And you talked about this, Diana. Get on the apps, find out what they can do, find out what they can't do, because that gives you a chance to either make lessons relevant or even use some of these apps in some of your assignments. I don't know a kid today who's going to end up needing PowerPoint when they get their first job, but they probably will need to know how to make a video. So there's a lot of skills that you can teach them that are social media related that can be very helpful, as long as you're familiar with the limitations and the benefits of these things. And the other is, final one, parents and teachers alike, be a good role model. Don't tell kids they can't have a phone in class and then get your phone out. Don't tell kids they have to, can't eat dinner with their phones and you have your phone out. In other words, you have to be consistent, because believe it or not, parents and teachers, you are the most important role models in their life, even if the kids don't act like you are. So what you do matters. So those were my 5 tips.
I love them. And again, you'll be getting that in your email tomorrow. We'll send you a link to that. Sunny, what would be your top takeaways from today, or tips for parents or teachers?
Well, I think Pamela really said it all, but I just want to reiterate again that parents, you do have the skills you need in order to guide your kids in media literacy. It is hugely beneficial if your school is teaching media literacy as a way to back that up and to reinforce those community norms, which I think are just absolutely essential for middle school kids and for the level that they're at, and the growing brains and everything that's happening for them at that moment. But that the values that we want to impart to our kids, and I'm in the trenches with you all doing the exact same thing every single day, trying to keep my kids balanced, ethical, safe, healthy, private, all of those things, that we have the tools to do that. And it's just a lot of work. And that really is the essence of parenting. And this is not different than what you do offline.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, Sonia. And I know I appreciate so much that you're out there teaching so many kids, as well as your own, how to have these skills. And I would just wrap up by saying, again, the time that you're going to spend solving problems, put that time into preempting them. It's fun, to talk about kids and find out what's happening in their social world, and also to bring the online world into the offline world, to see facial expressions, to work on communication skills, because our kids really need that today. So if you could make that bridge, I think you would be saving yourself a lot of time in the long run. So we want to help you in this journey. Again, you'll be getting an email with links tomorrow to a bunch of lessons. If there's something we've talked about that you would need a lesson for, contact us, support@cybercivics.com. We will send it to you. We want you to be able to solve your problems. Don't be shy asking. And I'm really excited to announce our next CyberWise chat. I'm going to see the date here. It's going to be March 19th, same time, same place. Our guest next month is Bill Marsland of Code Ninjas. It's a topic I'm excited to learn about. It's a company that teaches kids how to code. The title is Why Your Kids Should Learn Coding Now. So very different topic for us, and I can't wait. So hopefully you can join us next month as well. Thank you, Sony. Thank you always, Pam. Really appreciate talking to you guys, and we hope to see you all in a month. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, parents. If you enjoyed today's podcast and want to learn more, please visit our website just for you at www.cyberwise.org. But more importantly, if your kids are not already receiving digital literacy lessons in school, then you're definitely going to want to visit our other website, www.cybercivics.com to learn more about our in-school curriculum called CyberCivics. And please tell your children's schools about it, because every student deserves to be prepared to thrive in a digital world.